The book of Judges, session 62. We continue in Judges chapter 18. Verse 22, and when these were now, this whole thing about the tribe of Dan that's invading an area that they want to get their inheritance land back from. They came to the house of Micah and they wanted to, basically steal his whole religion, his priest, his ephod, his statutes, his images, this whole priestly religion, temple, worship system. And they wanted to steal that. So they bribed or basically bought out the priest. And, he's a non-profit prophet for profit. Okay, so 22. When they were a good way from the house of Micah, the men that were in the houses near to Micah's house were gathered together of Micah. The men that were in the houses near to Micah's house were gathered together and overtook the children of Dan. So here we see there's quite a lot of people surrounding Micah, and they want to protect Micah's house and this temple and this religion. Unfortunately, they're not standing up for Yahuwah. They're standing up for this false replacement worship system, and they're willing to fight their own brothers for it. They cried unto the children of Dan, and they turned their faces and said unto Micah, What ails you that you come with such a company? And he said, You have taken away my gods that I have made. Honestly, how in chapter 17, verse 13, does Micah say, Now that I have a priest, a Levite above all, Yahuwah will be with me, and he will do good to me, seeing that I've got a Levite. In the same breath, he admits in chapter 18, verse 24, that he has made his own gods. And now the Danites have come to steal away his own gods that he has made with his own hands. And it always reminds me of that lovely story we find in the book of Yashar that describes Abraham's conversion. How Abraham also lived in the house of his father, who was a high priest for Nimrod. And in this house there was a lot of idols. And the high priest, of course, was in charge of looking after the idols. And Abraham smashed them to pieces. And then his father was very angry and the whole village wanted to kill him. And Abraham said, It wasn't me that smashed them. It was the biggest idol that smashed all the other idols. And then his father said, How can you lie? The idols are not alive. How can they smash each other? And Abraham said, But the living God, Yahuwah Elohim, why do you serve these idols? And it's the same here now with Micah. Why don't you serve the living God? Why do you make something with your hands that can be stolen, taken away from you? Yahuwah is not happy with his people. We see this in almost every book of the Bible because they're always going after false worship and mixed religion, Babylonian mixed religion. God doesn't want anything mixed when it comes to him. He complains through the prophet Isaiah in Isaiah chapter 44 verse 15. Then this thing that you've cut down, this tree that you've cut down, some of it is for you to burn, but some you'll take and you'll make a graven image and you fall down and worship it. So some you make firewood and some you worship of this tree that you've cut down. So Micah says in verse 24, You've taken away my gods that I have made. You've taken away my priest. Do I have any more? And what is this that you say unto me? Why are you not feeling happy? What ails you? What's wrong with you? How can you ask me what's wrong with me after everything you've done? You stupid people, you must now know what's wrong with me. I'm angry and I want revenge. And the children of Dan said unto him, Let not your voice be heard amongst us, lest angry fellows ran upon you, and you lose your life with the lives of your household. So the Danites are telling him, Hey, shut up. The more you speak, the more you are in danger of us killing you. And the children of Dan went their way. And when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned back and went back to his house. And they took the things which Micah had made, and the priest which he had, and came unto Laish, unto a people that were at quiet and secure. And they smote them with the edge quiet and secure. And they smote them with the edge of the sword and burned the city with fire. Okay, so let's just consider this now. Dan, according to Moses, that Jehovah gave Moses, and then through Joshua, of course, Dan also had a rightful piece of the land that they were supposed to cleanse from all the pagans and all the Nephilim, and then live in the land and work it, but all the way serving Jehovah, so that they can have a beautiful, restful, shalom life in the promised land. Did they do their end of the bargain? A covenant has two ways. If you obey me and adhere to my commandments, then you'll inherit the land. Through many mighty works of wonder, God has brought them out of Egypt and gave them the promised land, and he subdivided the land into portions for each tribe. So yes, rightful specific piece of life, but only under the covenant of God. They have already broken the covenant. We see all through the book of Judges how the whole nation has gone after idol worship time and time and time again. So basically, I'm sorry, guys, your covenant is broken. You broke the covenant. So if you don't really have the piece of land that I promised you, it's not my fault, says Jehovah, it's yours. You rebelled against me. You broke my heart. You went and went whoring with other idols and with other gods, and you ignored me as your husband. So they didn't really deserve the land anymore. And somehow, when I look at the people in Laish, in this area where the Sidonians live, remember in the beginning of chapter 18, then the men came to, chapter 18 verse 7, then the 5 men departed and came to Laish, and saw a people that were there who were living careless, quiet, and secure. Yes, there was no magistrate. Yes, these people were pagans. Yes, they had no law-abiding set of rules. But they were living quiet and secure. They were living carelessly. They were actually living a very good life. Here in verse 27, they came unto Laish, unto a people that were quiet and secure. So these people weren't making problems for anyone around them. They were quiet and they were living securely. They were planting and eating from their own harvest, and they were living a nice, quiet life. So somehow I cannot help but feel that although the Sidonians were pagans and the tribe of Dan, well, supposedly is the tribe that is part of the nation of God, that, and not the part of the olive tree, they were better people than Dan. They lived quietly and securely. They looked after the land. They looked after their children. You know, it didn't seem that these guys were awful or disgusting and burning their children to idols and stuff. They were just living quietly and securely. Not Yahuwah's people, but still they had a good life on the land where they were established. And somehow I feel, you know, they deserved that. They got the quietness and the secureness because of the way they were looking after the land and because of the way they were living. It's whether you believe in God or not. If you obey the rules of nature, then nature looks after you. And Dan didn't really deserve this land anymore because he's covenant people. Although they were covenant people, they were worshipping idols, and here they were creating their own religion, and they wanted to move forward with that. And now they come and they kill all these quiet, secure people living in the land of Laish that didn't really, deserve it. But anyway, there was no deliverer because it was far from Sidon, and they had no business with any man there. And it was in the valley that lies by Beth Rehob. And they built a city and dwelt therein. And they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan their father, who was born unto Israel. Howbeit, the name of the city before was Laish. And both Laish and Dan reminds me of, how what horrible things has happened now in this area. Laish has to do with crushing or destruction, like a lion destroying with his teeth. And Dan has to do with judgment, destroying with his teeth. And Dan has to do with judgment. So both the quiet and secure people that lived in Laish received horrible judgment by the hands of Dan. But Dan is sorting for themselves horrible judgment that will come upon them because of their idol worship. And the children of Dan set up the graven image that they of course stole from Micah. And Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land. And they set them up Micah's graven image, which he had made all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. So we have a couple of issues here. Remember Dan and the northern side, if you've done those Bible studies with me of the positioning of the tabernacle and the tribes, the northern side is where all the idolatry took place. They always put up the idol poles and the Ashtaroth poles in the north. And here comes these two priests, Jonathan and his sons, then became the priests. But of course not ordained priests in the service of Yahuwah, but here we can see ordained priests in this false religion. Again, the people of God themselves creating false prophets, false priests, making their own religion and thinking that they are going to get away with it. We see that all the time. Even when the house of God, when the tabernacle was in Shiloh, when Samuel was the prophet and the tabernacle was in Shiloh, and then eventually David tabernacle was in Shiloh, and then eventually David became king and David's son built the first temple. All this time, the tribe of Dan somehow remained with this idol that Micah has made. It's almost like the idol is lasting a very long time. This idol doesn't even have a name, it's just a silver and gold image that Micah made. But it makes me think also there's a story of Micah's gold, the king that was very greedy and everything he touched turned to gold. And then eventually he died because even the food he touched turned to gold. So people's greed, Micah and the Levite priest, which we're going to learn a lot about in the next session, as well as the whole tribe of Dan, the whole idea of putting yourself in the way of judgment. What an idiot must you be to think that this is going to last. God is going to be good to him now that he has a Levite priest in his idol temple. The Danites thinking that they can take the inheritance in the promised land for themselves that Yahuwah promised them. But now they put up graven images and false priests and they start a whole new religion. But they just took the land, a piece of it, that's part of their inheritance that was promised by covenant through Abraham, through Isaac, through Jacob, all the way through Joseph and eventually Moses. This is the God that gave them the land. And yet they continue with their idol worship. So, yeah, I can just see the history repeating itself in our lifetimes, in how we have seen these false religions evolving over time. Until today, every Christian that you speak to has some sort of Babylonian mixture that you speak to, has some sort of Babylonian mixture in their religion. And it's not strange to them. What is strange to them is the Torah. What is strange to them is to be part of God's nation of Israel, to be part of his people that is called by his name. Even his name is strange to most people today that are trying to worship God with this Babylonian mixture of a religion. And maybe that's why in Revelation 7 verse 5, when it talks about the 144,000, 12,000 from each tribe, we do not find the name of the tribe of Dan. Dan is not part of the 144,000. If we look at the prophecy also that, or the blessing that Jacob gave over to Dan, Dan being compared to a serpent lying in the road, biting the heel of the horse that the driver is riding on, and then the driver falls off his horse. Dan, part of God's people, within the covenant promise, coming from the holy tabernacle journey, coming from a beautiful husband-wife relationship within the house of God. And that's why when we did the Sukkot 2022 studies, we saw how deception and corruption and idolatry comes from within the house of God, not from outside somewhere, so that we can point our fingers and say, yeah, it's them there. No, it's within us, inside of God's own people. The Micahs, this Levite priest, this tribe of Dan, is within the house of God itself. It is not so easy to recognize false promises and stuff when it's already inside the area that you trusted to be true and expected to be fine. And this is now that we come to chapter 19, the Levite and his concubine. This for me is what I talked to you about previously, saying it's an extremely difficult chapter. But I found so much correlation of the current world times. And if we study the end times and we see the whore of Babylon mixing with the false Antichrist beast system. But all of that, it's not that you can point your finger and say the whore of Babylon is there by Babylon. No, Babylon has crept right inside the midst of God's own people. I mean, even Jerusalem is called Sodom and Gomorrah. Jerusalem is called a whore. God is called a whore, a prostitute that rebelled against him. He divorced the 10 tribes. She became an absolute prostitute, running from different husbands to different husbands, like the woman that met Yeshua at the well. And she had 7 husbands, and the man she was living with at that stage, she wasn't even married to. And Yeshua said to her, I am the true husband. I am the one that all of you are supposed to come back to. And during our exile 2,000-year period, during the Gentile period, where the 10 tribes has been scattered into every Gentile nation, the Gentiles, although thinking they are worshipping the God of the Bible, has become absolute Babylonian idol worshippers, with all the traditions that they are using. The world is using that to worship God, the God of the Bible, but it's pagan traditions, with pagan to do with the Torah or Moses. But they want everything to do with gold and silver, idols and statues, and pagan dates and holy days, holidays, and no responsibility to keep the law. So it's a totally false religion appearing to be the true religion. Not using pagan priests, but using Levite priests. Not using pagan Babylonians or Egyptians, but using God's own people within his own tribes. This is the deception of the end times. And chapter 19, there's so much in the book of Hosea, in the book of Acts, in the book of Revelation, that I find explaining to us this difficult thing where this Levite chops up his wife, his concubine. We're going to read through this, and maybe I must just read through the whole chapter. We're going to read through this, and maybe I must just read through the whole chapter, and then we're going to break it up into the interesting, controversial, weird, and wonderful things that we can find in it. And all the time, remembering both historical and future. Remember the history and the lesson that's in the history, but also seeing the prophecy for the future. So let me just tackle for you chapter 19. I'm just going to read it. I want you to listen carefully. Maybe read with me. And then tomorrow we will start breaking it up section by section. And it came to pass in those days when there was no king. I'm going to just highlight for you the key verses. You can make notes. You already know what the meanings of these are. There was no king in Israel, that there was a certain Levite sojourning on the side of Mount Ephraim, who took to him a concubine out of Bethlehem, Judah. And his concubine played the whore against him, and went away from him back to her father's house to Bethlehem, Judah, and was there 4 whole months. Important. And her husband arose and went after her to speak friendly unto her and to bring her back again, having his servant with him and a couple of asses, donkeys. And she brought him into her father's house, and when the father of the damsel saw him, he rejoiced to meet him. And his father-in-law, the damsel's father, retained him, and he abode with him 3 days. And he ate and drank, and lodged there. And it came to pass on the 4th day, when they arose early in the morning, that he rose up to depart. And the damsel's father said unto his son-in-law, Comfort your heart with a morsel of bread, and then you can leave. And they sat down and ate and drank, both of them together. For the damsel, Tarry tonight, don't leave yet, man. Let your heart be merry, get drunk with me. And when the man rose up to depart the next morning, his father-in-law urged him. Therefore he stayed another day. And he arose again early in the morning, on the 5th day. So he's been trying for a couple of days now to leave. On the 5th day to depart. And the damsel's father said, Comfort your heart, I pray you, and just tarry until the afternoon. And they ate of them both together. And when the man rose up to depart, this Levite priest, he and his concubine and his servant, his father-in-law, the damsel's father, said unto him, Behold, now the day draws towards evening. I pray you, tarry all night. Behold, the day grows to an end. Stay with me. Let your heart be merry, and tomorrow you can get early on your way, that you can go home. But the man had enough. He had enough now. He would not tarry that night. He rose up and departed and came over against Jebus, which is Jerusalem. And there were with him 2 asses saddled, and his concubine was with him. And when they were by Jebus, the day was far spent, and the servant said unto his master, Come, I pray you, and let us turn into this city of the Jebusites, and lodge in it. And his master said unto him, We will not turn aside into this city of a stranger, that is not the children of Israel. We will pass over to Gibeah. And he said unto his servant, Come, let us draw near to one of these places to lodge all night, in Gibeah or in Ramah. And they passed on and went their way. And the sun went down upon them when they were by Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. And they turned aside to go in and to lodge in Gibeah. And when he went in, he sat him down in a street of the city, for there was no man. And behold, there came an old man from his work out of the field at evening, which was also of Mount Ephraim, and he sojourned in Gibeah. But the men of the place were Benjamites. And when he had lifted up his eyes, he saw a wayfaring man in the streets of the city. And the old man said, Where go you, and where do you come from? And he said unto him, We are passing from Bethlehem, Judah, toward the side of Mount Ephraim. That's where I'm from. And I went to Bethlehem, Judah, but I'm now going to the house of Yahuwah, and there's no man that receives me to stay in a house tonight. Yet there is both straw and provender, food, for our asses, for our donkeys. And there is bread and wine also for me, and for my handmaid, and for me, and for my handmaid, and for... No. Apologies for that interruption. There is enough straw and food for all of us, for my animals and for us. There's nothing that I need. And the old man said, Peace be with you, Shalom Chavrim. However, let all your wants lie upon me. Only do not stay in the street. This makes me think of Lot, in Sodom and Gomorrah. So he brought him into his house and gave provender unto his donkeys, and they washed their feet, and they ate and drank. Now, as they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, certain sons of Belial, beset the house round about, just like in Sodom and Gomorrah, and beat at the door and spoke to the master of the house, the old man, and he said, Bring forth the man that came into your house, so that we may know Yada, have sex with him, know him very intimately. And the man, the master of the house, went out unto them and said, No, my brethren, no, I pray you, do not do this wicked thing. Seeing that this man has come into my house, do not do this foolish thing. Behold, there is my daughter, a maiden, and this man's concubine. Them I'll bring out to you now. You can humble them. Well, that word humble is you can degrade them. You can make them feel very humbled. How do you make somebody feel humbled? You take away their dignity. You destroy their self-worth. You make them of no value. You treat them like a dog, like a piece of rubbish. This is what's going to happen to these women. Do with them what you want, what seems good unto you, but do not do such a vile thing to you. But do not do such a vile thing unto this man. But the men would not hearken to him. So the man took his concubine and brought her forth unto them, and they knew her. So they basically raped her and abused her all the night until the morning. And when the day began to spring, they let her go. They raped her and abused her the whole night. Then came the woman in the dawning of the day, and fell down at the door of the man's house, where his lord was, till it was light. When her lord, this Levite, when he rose up in the morning and opened the doors of the house and went out to go his way, not looking for his concubine, he's on his way now. And behold, the woman, his concubine, was fallen down at the door of the house, and her hands were upon the threshold. This is hot. She's been raped and beaten and degraded the whole night, and she's hardly alive, and she's lying on the floor, on the ground, and her hands are reaching up to the door, hoping somebody would open the door and bring her in and rescue her, save her. But there's nobody there. And he found her with her hands upon the threshold of the door. And he said unto her, Get up, let us be going. For heaven's sakes. Get up, let us go. She's just been raped the whole night long. How can you tell her to get up? Anyway, but she didn't answer. And then the man took her up upon an ass, and the man rose up and got back to his place. And when he came into his house, he got back to his place. And when he came into his house, he took a knife, he laid hold of his concubine, and divided her, together with her bones, into 12 pieces, and sent her into all the coasts. And it was so that all that saw it said, There was no such deed done nor seen from the day that the children of Israel came up out of the land of Egypt unto this day. Consider it, take advice, and speak your mind. So this difficult, horrible, horrifying chapter 19 of Judges ends with these words: Consider and take advice and speak your mind. There is something here in this chapter that we need to a much bigger scale than just this stupid man cutting up his poor raped concubine that he loved apparently so much that he went after her to go and fetch her again, blah, blah, blah. What physically happened here has a much deeper meaning, because it says, consider it. Consider every aspect of the story, which we will do tomorrow. Take advice. After we've considered every aspect of this story and we break open the deep spiritual prophecies, for the end times for us, and for the lifetime of the church, then we need to take advice. We need to take this to heart. We cannot ignore the lessons we are going to learn in chapter 19. So once we've considered it, once we've taken advice of it, then we can have a discussion. We can talk about it. We can say, no, it's got nothing to do with the end times. Oh, damn, it's got everything to do with the end times. We have to look at the deeper understanding and the key words of every person and every action and every area and every name and every number. Everything that is given here has got deep meaning. It's got hidden, secret knowledge. It's got revelation for those who's got eyes to see and ears to hear, and who's willing to put the effort in to try and find out what is God trying to teach us by allowing this horrible story in his Bible. He took a knife, he cut her up, he even divided her bones. So he had to take his knife, he had to cut off her arms, her legs, her knees, her feet, her hands, her ribs, her back, her hips, everything. He cut everything up with a knife. He didn't even have like electrical saw. You know, if I have to cut a whole carcass up, I'm going to struggle to cut it up with a knife. You know, when it comes to the bones that you want to separate, you need a saw. You have to saw through the bones. You can't separate it with a knife. This is a horrible. It's almost like a movie that you see on, you know, these crime and investigation where the mass murderers cut up their victims and put them in suitcases, you know. So, but I promise you, it's going to be worth our while to consider everything in this chapter, pick our minds. And this is the reason we're doing it, because this is not just so easy and so obvious. When you look at this chapter in your first glance, when you just read through this chapter, you might see a couple of things and you might think, yes, it's a horrible story. But we have to consider it, take advice, and speak our mind, because there are so much more than just first impressions in this chapter. And we will discover that together tomorrow.